I knew something was off the moment I heard the elevator chime. It was almost midnight, and the building was quiet except for the soft hum of electricity behind the drywall and the low thump of distant footsteps coming from the hallway carpet. I'd been standing in the entryway of our apartment for nearly 30 minutes by then, waiting. Not pacing. Waiting. A different kind of stillness. The kind that builds when you've already seen too much. When the elevator doors opened, Kathleen stepped out and everything I thought I might have been overthinking crystallized. She looked polished? No, she looked staged. Like she just stepped off a set. A deep emerald dress clung to her figure like it had been tailored with intent, stopping just above the knee, revealing heels I hadn't seen before either, pointed toe, black leather, expensive. Her hair, usually in a messy bun or straight and tucked behind her ears after long trips, was in an updo with soft waves pinned like she was heading to a wedding. But what really threw me wasn't the dress or the shoes, it was the blazer. It was too big for her. Not by a size or two, but clearly a man's cut. She spotted me immediately. Her expression barely flickered, but the way she tugged the blazer off her shoulders, too fast, too deliberate, said everything. Hey, she said, casual. Too casual. She tossed the blazer onto the armrest of the hallway bench like it meant nothing. Like it didn't smell like cologne that wasn't mine. Didn't expect you to be up. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, studied her face like it was a book I'd already read too many times, the kind where the ending suddenly doesn't match the first few chapters. She walked toward the apartment door like this was just another Tuesday night, like we were still normal, like I hadn't received a photo 6 hours earlier that made the ground beneath my feet tilt. I followed her inside silently. She flipped on the lights in the kitchen, humming under her breath. Everything about her seemed a touch too measured. Her heels clicked on the hardwood as she walked across the floor and set her purse down on the granite counter. So, I started, keeping my tone neutral. How was Austin? She opened the fridge. Fine. Long honestly, I barely saw sunlight. They kept us locked in back-to-back meetings. You know how these conferences are. She pulled out a bottle of sparkling water and twisted the cap off with a perfect little flick of her wrist. The lie was smooth. Practiced. Not even a pause. You didn't mention Jason would be there, I said, watching her reaction carefully. There was a beat, a half a second, maybe less. But it was there. A moment where her shoulders stiffened ever so slightly. She didn't turn around right away. Just sipped the water and finally glanced over her shoulder with a faint, tired smile. Jason? She repeated, eyebrows raised. What does he have to do with anything? I shrugged. Just came up. I heard he was at the same conference. She gave a soft laugh, the kind that's meant to dismiss a thought like it's not even worth entertaining. Wow, Riley? Seriously? That's what we're doing now? You're still keeping tabs on people I've known since college. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The moment she went on the offensive, I knew she had something to hide. Kathleen was many things, but clumsy wasn't one of them. Her transitions were tight, and her diversions were always wrapped in just enough emotional righteousness to make you question if you were the problem. I mean, come on, she continued, now leaning against the counter, arms crossed. I bust my ass all week, I come home at midnight, and instead of asking how I am, you're interrogating me about Jason? Again? She wasn't even trying to deny seeing him. Just skipping ahead to the part where I'm the jealous husband, the overthinker, the suspicious partner who makes up stories because I can't handle her success. But here's the thing, 6 hours earlier, I was at the office sorting through vendor quotes when I got a message from Caleb, a colleague attending the same investment summit in Austin. No context, just a blurry photo, followed by, "Isn't this your wife?" Thought she wasn't attending. In the photo, Kathleen sat at an outdoor terrace table, wine glass in hand, tilted slightly toward a man in a slate blue blazer. Jason Scott. Leaning in. Talking close. Smiling. Her hand rested on his forearm. It wasn't some random *T. It was an asterisk, mate. Familiar. The kind of body language you only share when you've shared more than just history. And now here she was, standing in our kitchen like nothing had happened, throwing out gaslight grenades like confetti. I'm not interrogating you, I said finally, keeping my voice even. I just asked if Jason was there. Because that's totally normal, right? She said. To randomly ask me about an ex-classmate every time I travel? Riley, this is getting exhausting. There it was, the switch. Classic deflection. Guilt gets cornered and suddenly it's about my behavior. My jealousy. My need to control. Kathleen was flipping the script so fast it would have given me whiplash if I hadn't seen it coming. You once said he was just an old friend, I replied, still steady, still not showing my cards. Nothing important. And he is, she snapped. God, are we really back to this? He sat at our wedding, Riley. You shook his hand. Yeah, I said, my tone sharpening now, and I also remember you saying you two weren't in touch anymore. She exhaled through her nose and rubbed her temples like I was the irrational one here. Like I was the one turning an innocent business dinner into a scene from some drama she wasn't cast in. Maybe I should just start texting you my GPS coordinates and a live stream of my meetings so you can relax, she said bitterly. Would that make you feel better? I stared at her for a long moment. And it wasn't anger I felt, it was recognition. The calculated calm, the tidy narrative, the passive-aggressive spin. This wasn't the first time she'd lied to me. It was just the first time I'd stopped pretending I didn't notice. She turned away and walked to the sink, rinsing out her glass like we were done here. Like the conversation had reached its natural, exhausting end and now we could both move on, her to bed, me to whatever corner of silence I was expected to disappear into. But I didn't move. I just stood there in the doorway, eyes fixed on that damn blazer she'd left draped over the hallway bench. Too long in the sleeves. A faint shadow of a scent I didn't recognize. A perfect reminder that someone else had been close enough to offer it to her and that she had accepted. For all her rehearsed exasperation and we*p*nized calm, she never once said, I didn't see Jason. Never once said, you've got it wrong. Just accusations, diversion, and silence where the truth should have lived. That's when it clicked. This wasn't the first lie. It wouldn't be the last. And whatever came next, whatever web she thought she could spin, I was already outside of it, watching it unravel from a distance. After that night, something shifted in me. I didn't say anything else to Kathleen. I didn't show her the photo or ask about the blazer again. But the silence between us changed shape. Before, it had been the usual kind, routine quiet, the kind that fills long-term relationships where comfort replaces curiosity. But this was surgical. A cold, calculated silence on my part because I had decided to start paying attention. And once I started really watching, the patterns were impossible to ignore. The next morning, Kathleen was already dressed and halfway out the door by the time I came into the kitchen. She looked perfect. Too perfect for a Thursday client meeting. Hair curled, not a strand out of place. Makeup light but precise. Even her outfit was sharp, sleek black pencil skirt, ivory blouse, and those nude heels I hadn't seen in a year. She wore confidence like armor, like she had something to prove to someone. I'll be home late, she said, reaching for her car keys without looking at me. There's a networking mixer downtown. I nodded, sipping my coffee. Which firm's hosting it? She blinked, hesitated for half a second. Catalyst Equity. Small thing. Probably not worth the traffic. That was the first obvious lie. I checked the firm's website later that day, no mention of any event. Their social media was silent. When I called an acquaintance who worked in that same building, he said the office had actually closed early for construction maintenance. That's when I knew this was bigger than Jason. Something about Kathleen had been changing for months, but I'd been too buried in my own life to really see it. It was like realizing your house had termites after the wood started to give under your feet. Small warnings easily brushed aside until the damage starts showing through the surface. The gym classes were the first thing I revisited in my head. Kathleen had claimed she'd joined a boutique women's boxing studio. I remember being proud of her for it. She said it helped her clear her head, feel strong. But now every time she came home with that gym bag slung over her shoulder, I remembered something weird. It was always light. Like it was barely packed. And I never once saw her bring in workout clothes to wash. No gloves. No worn-down sneakers. No water bottle with condensation. Just the same bag, week after week, tossed into the closet like a prop. So one night, when she was out training, I took the bag out. Opened it slowly. Inside? A half-used makeup remover wipe, a sealed pair of stockings, and a mint tin. That was it. Another lie. And then there was her laptop. Kathleen used to leave her MacBook open on the couch, in the kitchen, even on the bed sometimes when she was rushing. But now it was always closed. Password protected. I found out the hard way when I tried logging in one evening to check our shared calendar. Password failed. I tried our anniversary date, her old college login, even the dog's name. Nothing. It was a new password, one she hadn't told me about. Something private. Hidden. Just like her phone. We used to share locations on our phones not because of mistrust, just convenience. Picking each other up, coordinating errands. But a few weeks ago, she had accidentally disabled it during a system update. I didn't question it at the time. Now, it felt intentional. And every time I'd walk into the room, she'd flip her phone screen down. Not immediately, just fast enough to notice. I wasn't crazy. Not anymore. But I wasn't ready to confront her either. Not until I knew more. Not until I had something that couldn't be spun or rephrased into a communication breakdown. That's when I started keeping a small notebook in my nightstand drawer. Just a cheap, spiral-bound pad from the grocery store. I wrote down times, locations, things she said. It helped me stay calm. It helped me track what was real versus what she wanted me to believe. Like the trip to San Diego. She said it was a partner summit. A 3-day intensive. She left early Friday morning, suitcase packed with the usual, business casual, heels, toiletries. But something gnawed at me. I texted a friend from one of the firms she claimed would be attending. He said there was no summit that weekend, those had ended in March. While she was gone, I checked her car. I know how that sounds. I know it crosses a line. But the glove compartment held more than just receipts. Tucked beneath a parking stub and expired insurance card was a single receipt from a place called the Red Lantern in 45 miles south of her client meeting. A motel. Not even a hotel. Cash only. It hit me like a brick. She had lied again. Not just about who she was with, but about where she'd even been. I sat in her car for a long time just staring at that piece of paper. It was warm in the garage, no sound but the tick of the cooling engine and the hum of the light overhead. I remember thinking how surreal it felt, holding this tiny slip of paper that had more truth in it than anything Kathleen had told me in weeks. That was the moment I knew she wasn't just experimenting with emotional distance or pulling away because of stress. She was running 2 lives. Carefully. Methodically. And I was in only one of them. The next few days passed in a haze. I watched her move through our shared space like a guest performer, smiling when she needed to, withdrawing when she didn't. She'd call out "love you" on the way to the garage, but it sounded like she was reciting it from memory. Her hugs became shorter. Her kisses absent-minded. But it wasn't just the affection that had changed, it was the gaps in her stories. The slight mismatch between what she told me and what I already knew. One day, she said she had lunch with her assistant at a sushi place downtown. But the bank alert showed a charge from a wine bar in another district, 2 entrees, a shared appetizer, and a bottle of Pinot Noir. Not something you order in a client lunch on a Wednesday afternoon. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted to be sure. And I knew that the kind of truth I was chasing wouldn't come in text messages or second-hand sightings. If I was going to uncover the full scope of what Kathleen was hiding, I needed someone who knew how to find the things she thought she'd buried. That's when I reached out to Daniel Kim, a cybersecurity consultant a friend of mine had used during a messy intellectual property case. Not quite a private investigator, not quite a hacker. Somewhere in between. Quiet. Discreet. Professional. He didn't advertise, didn't show up in search engines. I got his number through a friend of a friend and called him on a Tuesday morning while Kathleen was meeting with clients in Bellevue. Digital forensics, he said when he answered, voice clipped and efficient. You got a breach or a ghost? I paused. Maybe both. We arranged to meet the next day. I handed over Kathleen's backup phone, an old iPhone she hadn't used in years but still synced to the cloud, and gave him a few *TS of suspicious logs. Daniel didn't ask many questions. Just nodded, took notes, and told me he'd call in 5 days. That was the longest week of my life. I didn't sleep well. I didn't eat much. I started going for long drives at night just to clear my head, retracing the same roads we used to take on weekends. The quiet didn't help, but at least it wasn't filled with Kathleen's voice, saying things she didn't mean, pretending things were fine. I kept wondering how far back it went. Was it just Jason? Or were there others? Had she been testing the edges of our trust for months? Years? Or had I been blind by choice, choosing not to see what had always been there? When the call finally came, Daniel's voice was neutral, professional. I've got something, he said. You're going to want to see this in person. And just like that, the waiting was over. The next morning, I met Daniel at a quiet cafe 2 towns over. A place neither Kathleen nor I had ever stepped into. He was already there when I arrived, button-down shirt, black laptop bag, and that same unreadable look I remembered from our first meeting. The kind of face that's seen things and learned not to flinch. He slid a flash drive across the table without a word. It was wrapped in a post-it with a short line written in clean, mechanical print. Prepare yourself before opening. I didn't open it right then. I nodded my thanks, paid for both coffees, and drove home with the flash drive burning a hole in my pocket. I couldn't bring myself to plug it in right away. Not until I'd locked the bedroom door and turned the blinds all the way shut, like I was about to unearth something ancient and cursed. And I was right. What Daniel recovered from Kathleen's cloud backups, deleted folders, and encrypted app mirrors wasn't just incriminating, it was a whole second life. I clicked open a folder titled Recovered_Personal, and there it was. 100 pieces of evidence neatly categorized. Photos. Messages. Metadata logs. Travel itineraries. Voice notes. It felt like I was looking through the diary of someone I never really knew. Or worse, someone who'd studied me long enough to fool me. The first folder was called February_Vineyard. That's when I saw them, Kathleen and Jason, side by side on a wine estate lawn I recognized from a billboard north of Sonoma. Her head rested against his shoulder, sunglasses perched on her face. The same dress I'd seen crumpled in the laundry last month, stained with something she'd claimed was airport coffee. It wasn't coffee. It was Cabernet. The timestamps told their own story. Check-in at 6:12 p.m. on a Friday, she claimed to be flying to Portland. A dinner reservation at the Vineyard's private chef's table. GPS data from photos all linked to her iCloud, geotagged to a suite under the name Monica Vale. Monica Vale? That's the name she used on the booking confirmation. A false identity. A fabricated alias. I sat there, numb, clicking through photos. Some were selfies, others were taken by strangers they'd handed the camera to, smiling as if they were newlyweds on a weekend escape. She looked happy, radiantly happy. Not like someone having a midlife crisis. Not like someone falling. No, she looked in place. My mouth went dry. The next folder was worse. **TS of messages between her and Jason, pulled from a secure chat app I'd never even heard of. Most messages had been wiped, but Daniel had recovered fragments. K, everything feels so easy with you. It's like I remember who I am again. J, you are you when you're with me. Riley doesn't see you anymore. He just sees routine. K, he keeps asking questions. I think he suspects something. I hate pretending, but I'm not ready to blow things up yet. Yet. That word cut deep. I scrolled further. An exported log of hotel check-ins matched dates I'd written in my notebook. She hadn't just lied about trips, she'd planned them around times I'd be gone. A quarterly diving expo in Oregon? She was in a beach town 2 hours south, checked into a casual hideaway that specialized in couples retreats. She'd even left behind a fake itinerary in our shared email marked with client names that didn't exist. She crafted whole spreadsheets, fabricated contact details, invented brands, made it all real enough that I'd never think twice. There were voice notes too. Not many, but enough. In one, I heard Jason's voice whispering something muffled and low. I couldn't make it out. But Kathleen's laugh after? That wasn't muffled. It rang out full and real. A kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. Not the polite chuckle she gave at dinner parties. This was different. Unfiltered. Like she was somewhere she actually wanted to be. It made my stomach turn. But the worst, by far, was the video. It was a short clip, just 10 seconds. Surveillance footage Daniel had pulled from a motel's security backup. Dated 2 months earlier. The same red lantern Inn I'd found the receipt from. In the grainy black and white footage, I saw Kathleen and Jason. She stepped out of a car, laughing, stumbling slightly in heels I recognized. He reached for her hand and they stood there for a moment. Then he leaned in. Kissed her. And they disappeared through the side entrance, arms around each other, oblivious. I slammed the laptop shut. The air felt thick, like it wasn't going in anymore. I got up, walked to the bathroom, and splashed water on my face. For a second, I caught my reflection and I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked broken or disheveled, but because of how calm I looked. Like my body already knew what my mind was still fighting to process. This wasn't some impulsive mistake. This wasn't an office flirtation that spiraled. Kathleen had built something. Nurtured it. Protected it. And she'd done it next to our life. Not outside it. That night, I sat in the living room, lights off, watching the shadows shift across the hardwood floor. I thought about our wedding day, how she looked walking down the aisle, holding her vows like she had written them that morning just for me. I thought about the cabin we rented every December, the fake tree we decorated with ornaments from gas stations and road trips. I thought about the time she stayed up all night nursing me through food poisoning, wiping my forehead with a wet towel and whispering, "You're safe. I'm here." How long had all that been real? Had any of it been real? Because this woman, the one I saw in those messages, those videos, that wasn't someone torn by guilt. That wasn't someone caught in an emotional whirlwind. That was someone who had made peace with the lie. Who had embraced it. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't speak to her the next morning either. She walked into the kitchen around 8 a.m. wearing a hoodie and joggers, talking about picking up oat milk and maybe doing a spa day that weekend. I nodded. Smiled. Said, "Sounds good." Because now I knew something she didn't. I had the truth. Cold. Documented. Undeniable. And I wasn't going to confront her with it. Not yet. No, I needed time. Not to collect more evidence, but to decide how I wanted this to end. She thought she still had control. That she could manipulate the narrative, spin the truth just enough to keep herself on the safe side of sympathy. But that control was gone. And the moment she realized it, really felt it was coming. Soon. The proof of the affair should have been the finish line. It should have been the peak, the undeniable climax where I confront her, she folds, and everything collapses like a stage set struck after the final scene. But it wasn't. Because the betrayal went deeper. And the next discovery wasn't about love. It was about theft. 2 days after Daniel's handoff, I was on a call with my accountant reviewing a quarterly report when he hesitated over a transaction line. "Hey, Riley," he said, clicking his tongue against his teeth, "did you authorize this withdrawal?" I leaned in. "What withdrawal?" "Line item under your business savings account. Wire transfer to an offshore account in Belize. Almost 42,000. Initiated mid-March." I pulled the spreadsheet onto my screen and stared at it. That account was used strictly for reserve operations, emergencies, vendor transitions, diving equipment overhauls. I hadn't touched it in 3 months. "No," I said slowly. "I didn't authorize that." He was quiet for a beat. "Well, someone did. Full access. Required dual authentication." And just like that, my heart dropped. I ended the call and logged into my business banking dashboard. I hadn't changed the passwords in weeks because, until now, I never had a reason to worry. Kathleen didn't handle the business side of things, never cared to. Or so I thought. I checked the security logs. The passcode had been reset via text verification, except the number listed wasn't mine. It was 1 digit off. And when I followed the digital trail, I saw what I had missed. Someone had requested password recovery twice in the same week. Same IP address. Same device ID. A phone that wasn't registered to me. A second phone. That's when I remembered seeing a charger plugged in behind her nightstand a few weeks ago, different cord. Not for her regular phone. I'd assumed it was for her Kindle. It wasn't. By the time I dug through our shared safe, the full scope started to form. Tucked behind some expired passports and old tax returns was a file folder I didn't recognize. Inside were photocopies of my driver's license, business registration forms, and my digital banking setup sheet with my signature. Only it wasn't mine. She had forged it. I stared at the pages, trying to make sense of what I was holding. My own information, twisted and repurposed. I knew my signature. I'd written it 1,000 times on supplier contracts, insurance forms, customer waivers. But this one had that odd spacing Kathleen's handwriting always had. Perfect mimicry, but not perfect enough. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had stolen from me. From the business I built with my own hands. The one I'd mortgaged my future for. I called Daniel again. "Can you dig deeper?" I asked, my voice raw. He didn't ask questions. Just said, "Send me everything." What came back 3 days later made the vineyard look quaint. At least 6 separate transfers spread across 4 months had been sent to various shell companies. The paper trail was intentionally obscure, companies registered in the Bahamas, Panama, Luxembourg. But they all funneled back to a holding account associated with a card registered under the name. Lauren Avery. Another alias. Daniel confirmed the identity was fake. He traced the IP address used to open the online account to our own apartment's Wi-Fi. It was Kathleen. Again. I sat on the edge of her bed, staring at my hands. I'd built this company from scratch. 8 years of blood, sweat, and cold water dives, hauling tanks, training green divers, dealing with regulators and coastal zoning boards. Every penny earned felt hard-won. And she siphoned it like it was nothing. But that wasn't the end. Jason Scott wasn't just her affair partner. He had a history. Daniel pulled his employment records, social ties, and former affiliations. Jason had worked at a boutique investment firm 6 years ago, terminated for breach of fiduciary conduct. The details were sealed, but rumors floated around. Fabricated investor reports, skimming consulting fees, off-the-books transactions. No formal charges filed. Too slippery. And now? He was fronting a new startup based around ocean conservation technology. A brand new venture, still pre-revenue and shockingly seeking angel investors. Guess whose money helped seed it? Mine. The wire transfers Kathleen sent under fake LLCs? They weren't just going into hiding. They were funding Jason's company. A company whose pitch deck used language lifted directly from my old diving grant proposals. Word-for-word phrases, even recycled infographics. He hadn't just taken my wife. He'd taken my work. And she helped him do it. The more I unraveled, the more twisted it became. One of the offshore accounts had a secondary cardholder. A name I didn't recognize, Amelia Hart. But the mailing address for the account? A P.O. box in a part of town Kathleen used to visit weekly under the excuse of therapy appointments. She told me it helped her anxiety. Apparently, what helped her anxiety was moving stolen money through international banks. Legal counsel confirmed my worst fears. My name had been used in at least 2 forged documents tied to Kathleen's transfers. Not enough to implicate me fully, but enough to raise questions. Enough to make any investigation messy. This qualifies as financial fraud, identity misuse, and potentially conspiracy, said the attorney I met through Daniel. But you're lucky. You caught it early. Early. The word didn't feel right. None of this felt early. It felt late. Like I'd arrived after the fire and was only now finding the ashes. That night, I couldn't look at her. Kathleen came home around 6 p.m. smiling. I picked up that sea salt candle you like. Thought it might help you sleep. Sleep? She set it on the kitchen island, then looked at me like everything was still intact. Like I was still the fool who'd buy the excuse. Her eyes were soft. Her voice measured. Every move felt like a performance, and suddenly I couldn't unsee the script. She kissed my cheek. I let her. Because I wasn't done yet. She had staged this like a long con. Lied with precision. Covered her tracks with years of trust she'd carefully cultivated. But I had the truth now. The full map of her betrayal. And while part of me wanted to walk away, burn it all down, disappear, and let her live in the wreckage, another part of me wanted something more. Not revenge. Not even justice, really. Clarity. And consequence. If you'd asked me 6 months ago what revenge looked like, I'd have said it wasn't worth the energy. That people eventually sink under the weight of their own lies. That life balances itself out. But after watching Kathleen lie to my face every morning while wearing jewelry she bought with stolen funds, after seeing Jason's startup rise on the back of my ideas and my money, after realizing I was a placeholder in a life that was already being replaced, I changed my mind. Revenge, when it's smart and clean, isn't about rage. It's about clarity. Precision. Letting the truth do what fists and shouting never could. And I had the truth. It came down to timing. Jason's company, Current X, was preparing a public pitch at the Pacific Marine Investment Summit in Seattle. A major event. High-profile investors, tech entrepreneurs, nonprofits, even members of NOAA. Big room. Bigger eyes. The perfect place for a clean takedown. I contacted the event coordinators anonymously through my lawyer and offered to sponsor a key segment of the conference, something high impact. I wasn't just a small business owner anymore. I was the man they thought Jason was pretending to be, a conservation leader, a technical expert, and, as of that week, the conference's second-largest private donor. It wasn't hard to convince them to add a new session, fraud prevention and financial transparency in green tech ventures. Kathleen, meanwhile, was excited. She thought I was out of town that week, doing field dives off the coast. She had no idea I was in a hotel downtown, preparing an evidence package for federal agents and working with AV techs to assemble one very specific slideshow. The morning of the conference, I dressed in my best tailored gray suit, one she'd helped me pick out last year, ironically. I walked through the lobby with a calmness I hadn't felt in weeks. I wasn't angry. I was aligned. The session started at 11:30 a.m. in the Coral Ballroom. Jason's pitch was scheduled for noon, same room. They'd be sitting there, front row, not knowing what was coming. I stepped on stage to polite applause. The conference coordinator introduced me as a longtime diving operator, marine business advisor, and fraud case sponsor. I took the mic and began like I was just another concerned entrepreneur, talking about transparency, ethics, oversight. A few yawns in the crowd. Standard stuff. Then I changed the slide. The screen behind me lit up with a spreadsheet, blurred names, but the numbers clear, over $240,000 in wire transfers over 4 months, tracked from a private LLC to an offshore account linked to a holding firm in Panama. Then another screen, 2 digital signatures. Mine. And a forged version. Highlighted side by side. The murmurs started. And then I clicked again. Next slide, a high-res photo of Kathleen and Jason arm in arm outside the Vineyard Suite. The same image Daniel had pulled from Kathleen's deleted files. I kept speaking voice calm. These funds were transferred without consent using fraudulent authorizations from my business, C. Riley Diving Company. The receiving parties are individuals presenting at this very summit. Gasps rippled through the room. I heard it before I saw them, Jason's voice, sharp and panicked. What the hell is this? Kathleen, seated beside him, turned ghost white. She stood up fast, looking for an exit. I continued speaking over the rising noise. Every phrase was precise. These materials were provided to federal authorities in advance. The parties involved have constructed a network of shell corporations to funnel stolen capital through environmental startups under fabricated identities. I turned toward the screen again. Slide 4, a folder of supporting files, hotel receipts, false identities, company registrations, timestamped surveillance. The silence was now electric. The AV team didn't flinch. They were briefed. In the corner of the room, 2 federal agents stood. Plainclothes. They moved without fanfare, just like they'd promised. Walked up the aisle, quietly but firmly approaching Kathleen and Jason as I finished speaking. Kathleen was frozen. Jason stood up, palms out like some cheap courtroom drama. This is a setup. I didn't do anything. This guy's insane. He didn't finish. The agents calmly produced documents. 1 step between him and the aisle. Jason's bravado melted. Kathleen finally turned toward me, eyes wide and wild like she'd just woken up inside a nightmare. I didn't say a word to her. Not a nod. Not a glance. Let her see the silence. Let her understand what it meant to be on the outside of truth for once. They escorted her out just as the moderator tried to regain control of the room. But the damage was done. Reporters whispered furiously into recorders. Phones were already up. Someone near the back had live-streamed the entire segment. The conference coordinator's face was pale as he pulled at his tie, but he didn't stop it. He knew what I knew. This was bigger than optics. This was exposure. Afterward, I was approached by 3 different attendees, investors who'd almost signed with Jason, each one thanking me with a strange combination of discomfort and admiration. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was tired. But the truth finally had a public record. I walked out of the Coral Ballroom around 1 p.m. The air outside felt lighter, almost humid. Summer was rolling in, but I hadn't noticed until that moment. I sat at a bench across from the venue and just breathed. It was done. But not over. That night, my lawyer called to confirm that Kathleen and Jason were being held for questioning. Authorities had enough to freeze assets, begin financial tracing, and dig into the deeper network we suspected. Because as bad as Kathleen was, Jason was worse. His company wasn't a startup. It was a shell within a web. And she was either a willing architect or the most dangerous kind of accomplice. The next morning, I received a text from her sister, Megan. I don't know what happened, Riley. But I believe you. If there's anything I can do, say it. I stared at the message for a long time. Kathleen's family had always been warm. Trusting. Her sister especially. A single mom, legal clerk, endlessly kind. I remembered Thanksgiving dinners where Megan was the only one who asked how my business was going, who offered to help with contracts. I never told her how Kathleen had distanced from her over the years. I thought it was just family drift. Now I wondered what Megan already knew or suspected. I replied, I might take you up on that. There's more coming. The weeks following their arrest uncovered what I'd feared and more. Kathleen and Jason weren't just partners in betrayal, they were part of a larger scheme. Their startup was a front, one of over a dozen tied to a fraud ring laundering funds through fake green initiatives. Over 20 victims. Shell companies stacked like nesting dolls. Kathleen cut a deal testimony for leniency. She confessed to forging my signature, accessing offshore accounts, and feeding Jason my business contacts. Worst of all, she admitted Jason had floated the idea of removing me, faking a boating accident to trigger a life insurance claim. She claimed she backed out. But that was the moment I understood. I hadn't just been betrayed. I'd been disposable.